The lawsuit was waiting on my kitchen table like someone had broken in and left it there on purpose. Not a letter, not a warning, a thick stack of paper with a case number on top, and one phrase that made my stomach go cold. Stalking harassment. 3 cities, multiple incidents. I read it twice because my brain refused to accept the words in the order they were printed. My parents were suing me for stalking them across the state. While I was still sleeping in a recliner because lying flat made my back feel like it was splitting open. I stared at the dates listed in the complaint. Weeks, months, like they were coordinates to a life I didn't recognize. My father had highlighted lines in yellow, as if highlighting made something true. The worst part wasn't the accusation, it was how familiar the tactic felt. My parents don't fight to win arguments. They fight to win access to your house, your money, your name on a document. And 3 pages into the filing, I found the real target. A proposed settlement paragraph, written like it was a reasonable solution. In exchange for dismissal of the complaint, defendant agrees to transfer ownership interest in the penthouse. My penthouse, the one I bought with money I earned after a decade of working myself into the ground, the one my parents had mocked as too much, until they realized it was worth enough to solve their problems. I leaned back carefully, one hand braced on the table because my spine still wasn't mine yet. The elastic strap of my back brace pressed into my ribs. Even breathing felt like a negotiation. I didn't cry. I didn't call them. I did the only thing that works with people who build lies on paper. I started building a file. I photographed every page, every date, every incident, every city they claimed I'd followed them to. I made a folder on my laptop and named it exactly what it was: Evidence Stalking Claim. Then I pulled out my discharge packet from the hospital, the one I hadn't even unpacked because it felt too heavy emotionally to look at. Inside were the facts my parents couldn't rewrite with highlighters: surgery date, rehab dates, follow-up appointments, physical therapy schedule, a note about mobility restrictions, the name of the hospital unit. I sat there in the quiet kitchen, looking at paperwork from 2 different realities. One said I was driving across the state to stalk my parents. The other said I was learning how to stand up without collapsing. The hearing was set fast, almost too fast. That told me they weren't trying to seek justice. They were trying to corner me before I could heal. On the morning of court, I moved like I was made of glass. Shower, brace, loose blouse that wouldn't rub the incision area, flat shoes. I took pain medication with water and waited long enough for my hands to stop shaking. In the car, I didn't play music. I didn't practice speeches. I rehearsed one sentence that I could say without emotion. Please name the dates. Because dates don't care about tears. Dates either match reality or they don't. The courthouse smelled like metal and old air conditioning. When I walked in, the back brace made me stiff, and I hated that it made me look weak. My parents were already there, sitting on the bench outside the courtroom like they belonged in that building. Polished, calm. My mother had her concerned citizen face on, soft mouth, worried eyes. My father wore a jacket he only wore when he wanted to look like a man people should believe. When they saw me, my father smiled. Not happy, not proud, satisfied. Like he'd finally found a way to drag me into a room where he could force an outcome. My mother stood up first, voice loud enough for the hallway to hear. "There she is," she said, shaking her head like I'd arrived to cause harm. My father didn't bother with greeting. He stepped closer and said it quietly like it was an order he expected to be obeyed. "Now you finally signed the penthouse over." I didn't react. I looked straight at him and said, "We'll let the judge decide what's real." He laughed under his breath. "The judge will decide you're dangerous." That word, dangerous, was their favorite. Not because I was, because it made strangers stop asking questions. We went in. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No big speeches. Just a judge behind a desk, a clerk typing, a court officer standing like a wall. My parents sat at the plaintiff table with their attorney. Their lawyer looked relaxed, already flipping through tabs like this was routine. I sat alone on the other side with my folder, my brace, and the kind of calm you only get when you've been cornered before and survived it. The judge looked down at the complaint, then up at me. Ms. He began, then paused and corrected himself without looking for my reaction. You're representing yourself today? Yes, Your Honor, I said, for this hearing. My father's attorney launched into it immediately, smooth, rehearsed. He described months of fear, repeated sightings, escalation across multiple cities. He used words like pattern and threat as if they were facts instead of storytelling. My mother dabbed her eyes at exactly the right moments. My father stared at the judge like a man waiting for a stamp of approval. Then the judge looked at me. Response? He asked. I stood slowly, careful with my back, and kept my voice flat. I'm asking for one thing first, I said, before we talk about feelings or stories. The judge leaned back slightly. Go on. I held up the complaint and tapped the page with a timeline. Please, I said, name the dates. My father's attorney blinked. The dates are in the filing. I want them read into the record, I said, without raising my voice. Out loud. A small pause. The judge looked at the page again, then nodded to the clerk. Read the dates, he said. The clerk began. One by one, city, date, time window. As she read, something strange happened inside me. My fear didn't grow, it evaporated. Because the dates weren't random, they were familiar. The clerk reached the second set, another city, another week, and I felt my pulse steady like a lock clicking into place. Those weren't just weeks I was recovering. Those were the exact weeks I was in the hospital. The judge watched my face change and stopped the clerk with a small raise of his hand. You recognize these dates, he said. Yes, I replied. I do. I opened my folder with both hands, slowly, clearly, so no one could accuse me of theatrics. I slid one document forward across the table. My discharge papers, I said, with admission and discharge dates. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes flickered toward my father for half a second. Too quick for most people to catch, but I caught it. The judge picked up the paper, scanned the top line. Then his eyes dropped to the bottom, to the bold stamp, the hospital seal. And the moment he saw it, his expression changed so sharply the air in the room felt different, like the case had just stopped being a family dispute and started becoming something else entirely. He looked up at my father. Not angry, not confused, direct. Sir, he said quietly, but stand up. My father hesitated, just a fraction. And in that hesitation, I understood something that made my stomach go cold in a new way. They hadn't just lied. They'd filed these dates on purpose, betting I wouldn't have the strength to fight back. My father stood up like the judge had asked him to rise for an award. He smoothed his jacket, lifted his chin, and gave the courtroom the version of himself he saves for bankers and managers, polite, wounded, righteous. The judge didn't match his energy. He held my discharge papers in one hand, the complaint in the other, and looked at my father like a man staring at a locked door someone keeps pretending is open. Sir, the judge said, quiet but sharp, these dates in your filing fall inside the exact period your daughter was hospitalized. My father didn't blink. She wasn't hospitalized the whole time. I felt my pulse jump, but my voice stayed calm. I'd expected that line. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you saying the hospital documents are inaccurate? No, my father said quickly. I'm saying she could still leave. For therapy. For appointments. She could still follow us. His attorney shifted in his chair. Tiny movement, almost annoyed. Like my father was saying the quiet part too loudly. The judge glanced at the attorney. Counsel? The attorney stood, smoothing his tie, and tried to wrap my father's mess in professional language. Your Honor, the plaintiffs have experienced repeated incidents, he said. They reported sightings and contact attempts. The defendant's physical condition is not fully known to them. Not fully known. The judge's gaze dropped to my brace, then back up. She is sitting in a back brace, he said flatly. And you filed this case as if she were driving 3 cities a week. My mother dabbed at her eyes. Perfectly timed. She's stronger than she pretends. My mother whispered loudly, just loud enough for the room to hear. She's manipulative. The judge's eyes flicked to her. One fast look. And then he did something that made my stomach unclench for the first time that morning. He didn't argue with my mother. He ignored her. "Ma'am," he said to me, "do you have anything beyond this discharge summary?" "Yes," I answered. "I have my admission record, my inpatient rehab transfer, and a physical therapy schedule that shows I wasn't cleared to drive." The attorney lifted a hand slightly. "Objection, relevance." The judge cut him off with a small, final motion. "Relevance is the foundation of your case," Emery said. "Sit down." The attorney sat. I opened my folder again, slowly, like I was laying out tools instead of emotions. I slid forward a second paper. Hospital admission and transfer dates printed cleanly with my name and the facility addresses. Then a third, a physical therapy restriction note. Then a fourth, a medication log summary. Something I never thought I'd be grateful to have until I needed to prove my own body had limits. The judge scanned each page without hurry. My father's face began to change. Not panic yet, but something close. The realization that he was no longer controlling the story. "Sir," the judge said finally, "explain to me how your daughter was in 2 cities on the same day while also listed as inpatient." My father's jaw tightened. He didn't answer the question. He tried to redirect. "She sent people," he snapped. "She sent someone to watch us." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Do you have evidence of that?" My father hesitated. Just a fraction too long. Then he gestured toward his attorney. "We have proof." The attorney stood again, annoyed now, and held up a packet. "We have a stalking log," he said, "and witness statements." The judge held out his hand. "Give it to the clerk." The attorney passed it over with a confident little smile, the kind of smile that assumes paper wins automatically. The clerk flipped through it. Page after page of typed entries. Spotted in parking lot. Seen near grocery store. Vehicle followed us. Same woman. The judge stared at one entry and tapped it with his finger. "This one," he said. "You claim she was seen outside your apartment complex at 9:40 p.m. My father nodded hard. "Yes?" The judge looked at me. "Where were you at 9:40 p.m. that night?" I didn't even have to think. I'd already highlighted it. "In a hospital bed," I said, "in the orthopedic unit, under observation." The judge's gaze snapped back to my father. "How do you know she was there?" My father answered too quickly. "Because we saw her." The judge leaned back slightly. "You personally saw her?" My father swallowed. "Yes." The judge nodded once, like he was letting my father commit to the lie in a way that would matter later. Then he turned to the clerk. "Pull up the hospital admission dates again," he said. The clerk typed. The printer hummed softly in the corner like it was ready to testify too. Then the judge looked at my father's log again, eyes cold. "Your witness statement for that night," he said, "is signed by someone named Mark Holloway." My father's mouth tightened. "Yes, he's a neighbor." The judge looked at me. "Do you know a Mark Holloway?" "No," I said. "I don't." My father jumped in, loud. "Of course she'll say that." The judge held up his hand. "Sir," he said, "you don't get to talk over your own evidence." Then he looked at the signature line again, longer this time. And I watched his expression change in a way I didn't expect. Not, "This is weak." More like, "I've seen this before." He looked at the clerk. "Search that witness name in the system." The clerk typed again, faster. My father's attorney shifted in his chair. My mother stopped dabbing her eyes. The silence grew heavy, and in that silence, my father did what he always does when the room stops obeying him. He went for humiliation. "Look at her," he said, turning slightly so the whole courtroom could hear. "She's sitting there acting calm like she's innocent. She's been obsessed with us for years. She watches our lives. She—" The judge's voice cut through him, low and dangerous. "Enough." My father stopped mid-sentence, stunned. The judge leaned forward and tapped the settlement paragraph in the complaint, the one I'd found on page 3. I want you to explain this, he said, looking directly at my father's attorney. Why does a stalking complaint include a proposed resolution that transfers a penthouse? The attorney blinked, then tried to smile it off. It's an agreement between parties, Your Honor, he said. To avoid ongoing conflict. To avoid conflict, the judge repeated slowly. By taking her property. My father's jaw clenched. My mother whispered, Sharp, it's family. The judge didn't even look at her. He looked at the attorney and said very plainly, This reads like leverage. The attorney's smile thinned. Your Honor, the plaintiffs have incurred emotional distress, and the judge raised a hand again. No, he said. This is not small claims. This is not therapy. This is an attempt to use a court filing to force a transfer. Then he turned to me. Do you have any documentation of your father demanding this penthouse outside of court? He asked. I did. And my parents had given it to me, the way they always do, by speaking too confidently when they think no one is recording. I reached into my folder and pulled out a single printed page with a date and a phone number. A voicemail transcription, I said, from 2 months ago. My father's head snapped toward me. What? I slid it forward. The judge read silently for 3 seconds. Then he looked up at my father and spoke so quietly the whole room leaned in. Sir, he said, did you leave her a message saying, sign it over or we'll ruin you in court? My father's face flushed so fast it looked painful. He started. The judge didn't let him finish. Clerk, he said, mark this as an exhibit. The clerk nodded. My mother's voice rose, trembling with rage now. She's twisting it. She provoked him. The judge turned his eyes to her for the first time fully, and the room went still. Ma'am, he said, you will not speak unless asked. My mother froze. My father's attorney cleared his throat, trying to recover. Your Honor, he said carefully, regardless of the hospital dates, the plaintiff still felt threatened. The judge cut him off with a look. Feelings don't create geography, he said. Evidence does. Then the clerk's computer made a tiny notification sound. Soft, almost nothing. The clerk stared at the screen for a beat too long. The judge noticed instantly. What is it? He asked. The clerk swallowed. Your Honor. The witness name, Mark Holloway. Yes, the judge said. The clerk looked up, uneasy. That name is attached to another filing, he said. A different case. The judge's eyes narrowed. What kind of case? The clerk hesitated, then said it. A prior restraining order petition, he said. Filed by... He glanced at the screen again, like he wanted to be sure before he spoke. Filed by the father. My father went perfectly still, and the judge leaned back in his chair, staring at him like the pattern had just clicked into place. Because this wasn't just a lie, it was a method. And whatever the clerk was about to read next, my father hadn't expected the court to already recognize the handwriting. The judge didn't slam his gavel or start yelling. He just sat there, holding my discharge papers like they were heavier than they looked, and stared at my father like he was deciding what kind of danger he was dealing with, emotional or procedural. Clerk, he said, pull the prior filing tied to this witness name. The clerk clicked, scrolled, then turned her monitor slightly toward the judge. I couldn't see the details, but I saw the judge's eyes move left to right like he was reading something familiar. Then he looked up. Wow, he said to my father. You filed a restraining order petition last year. My father's chin lifted. Yes, because she's been... The judge cut him off with a small raise of his hand. In that petition, he continued, you submitted a witness statement signed by Mark Holloway. My father blinked hard. Different case. The judge didn't respond to the excuse. He responded to the pattern. And in that case, he said, the witness statement uses nearly identical language to the one you submitted here. His eyes shifted to the attorney. Counsel, the judge said, did you draft these statements? The attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, the plaintiffs provided their log and supporting witnesses. We compiled, the judge repeated slowly, like he was tasting the word. Or manufactured. My father's face flushed. This is ridiculous. The judge didn't argue. He asked the most basic question in the world. Where does Mark Holloway live? He asked. My father answered too fast. Next building over, same complex. The judge nodded once. Address? My father hesitated, then said an address confidently, unit number included, like he'd rehearsed it. The judge didn't react. He looked at the clerk. Verify that address exists, he said. The clerk typed. One long moment passed, then another. Her face changed, subtle, but it changed. Your Honor, she said carefully, that unit number doesn't exist in that building. My father's attorney shifted in his chair. My mother's hand stopped moving. My father's voice rose immediately. It's a typo. The judge's eyes stayed steady. A typo, he repeated, on a sworn statement. My father snapped, It's still a real person. The judge leaned forward slightly. Then produce him, he said. If he exists, we can hear from him. My father's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked toward his attorney, like he wanted him to fix it. The attorney stood again, tight smile. Your Honor, we can subpoena the witness for a later date? No, the judge said, calm and final. You're asking me to treat this as an emergency threat case. That means we don't play games with imaginary witnesses. The courtroom felt colder. My mother tried to rescue it with tears. He's not imaginary, she whispered. We're terrified. The judge didn't look at her. He looked at my father again. Now, he said, I'm going to ask you a different question. My father stiffened. Okay. How? The judge said, tapping my discharge paperwork with one finger. Did you select dates that place your daughter in 3 different cities while she was recorded as an inpatient? My father's face tightened. We didn't select anything. We reported what happened. The judge's eyes narrowed. Then explain the city list. My father leaned into the lie. We saw her, he said. We saw her car. We saw her following us. The judge held up my therapy restriction note. This note says she was not cleared to drive, he said. My father shrugged, an ugly little shrug. She lies, he said. She can drive. She just wants sympathy. I felt my hands curl around my folder so hard my knuckles hurt, but I kept my voice flat. Your Honor, I said, I wasn't driving. I couldn't even sit upright without pain medication. My father laughed once, short, cruel. Sure. The judge's attention shifted to something else in the paperwork, and I saw it. The moment he stopped thinking like a family court referee and started thinking like a fraud judge, he turned to my father's attorney. Counsel, he asked, did you obtain any medical information about the defendant prior to filing? The attorney blinked. No, Your Honor. The judge didn't raise his voice. He just asked again, slower. Then how did your clients know the exact dates to claim incidents? During a hospitalization. The attorney hesitated, just a fraction, and in that fraction, my stomach tightened. Because I knew what it meant. Someone had looked. My mother answered before the attorney could. She told us, my mother said quickly. She bragged about it. She said she was in the hospital to make us look bad. I stared at her. She didn't even flinch. The judge stared at her, too. Ma'am, he said, you are not under oath yet. Be careful. My mother shut her mouth. The judge looked back at the attorney. Is there any document in your filing that includes medical verification? He asked. The attorney's face went careful. There is. A release, Your Honor. My pulse spiked. A release? The judge repeated. Yes, the attorney said, reaching into his folder. A HIPAA authorization. Signed. Signed. The word hit my ribs like a fist. The attorney walked it to the clerk. The clerk handed it to the judge. I watched the judge scan the page. His eyes moved to the signature line at the bottom. Then he looked up at me. Did you sign this? He asked. I didn't even need to see it. I could feel the trap from across the room. No, I said, absolutely not. My father's voice exploded. She's lying, he shouted. She signed it and now she's pretending. The judge lifted a hand. My father stopped mid-breath. The judge looked down again and I saw his expression shift. Small, almost invisible. Then he glanced at the bottom corner of the release. A stamp? Not a hospital stamp. A notary stamp. He leaned closer, reading the notary block like it mattered more than the words above it. Counsel, the judge said slowly. Who notarized this? The attorney glanced at the page. It should be listed. The judge read it out loud anyway. Notary commission number. He paused and then repeated it, like he wanted the clerk to hear it clearly. Commission ending in 821. The clerk's fingers froze on the keyboard. The judge noticed immediately. Clerk, he said, does that number mean anything to you? The clerk swallowed. Your Honor, that notary commission is flagged. The room went dead silent. My mother's eyes flicked to my father, fast, panicked. My father's face tightened like he'd just realized he'd stepped on the wrong wire. The judge kept his voice calm, but his tone changed, lower, sharper. Flagged how? He asked. The clerk looked down at the screen again. Suspended, she said, and associated with prior questionable filings. My stomach turned cold, because now it wasn't just, my parents are exaggerating. Now it was, someone notarized a medical release in my name using a flagged commission. The judge looked at me again. Ma'am, he said very quietly, if you didn't sign this, then someone filed a notarized document with your name and a suspended notary commission. He paused. That's not family conflict. That's potential criminal conduct. My father's attorney stood up fast. Your Honor, we can... No, the judge said, cutting him off. Sit down. Then he looked at the bailiff. I want both parties to remain, he said. No one leaves this floor. The bailiff nodded and stepped closer to the doors. The judge turned back to me. Do you have an ID signature we can compare? He asked. Yes, I said, pulling my driver's license out of my wallet with shaking fingers. The judge held out his hand. I walked it forward carefully, back, braced tight, breath shallow. He looked at my license, then at the notarized release, then back at my father. And the way his eyes landed on my father told me everything. He wasn't trying to decide who's right anymore. He was trying to figure out how far this went. Then he turned to the clerk and said the sentence that made my blood go ice cold. Print the entire filing packet, he ordered. I want to see every attachment they submitted. Because if there was one fake document in there, there was probably more. The printer in the corner started working like it had been waiting for permission. Page after page slid out, clean, official, impossible to unsay once it existed on a court paper. The judge didn't look at my parents while it printed. He looked at the documents like he was building a timeline inside his head. Clerk, he said, bring the full packet here. The clerk carried the stack to the bench and set it down carefully like it was heavier than paper should be. My father sat rigid, jaw clenched, staring straight ahead like he could outstare the room into believing him. My mother kept her hands folded, trying to look like a woman who had no idea how any of this happened. But I saw the tiny tremor in her fingers. Not fear for me. Fear of the record. The judge flipped through attachments one by one. He didn't rush, he didn't dramatize, he just kept turning pages and turning them, until he found exactly what he was looking for. Here, he said finally, holding up a page. Exhibit D. He read the header aloud. Photo evidence. Incident log. My stomach tightened, because I hadn't known they included photos. The judge slid the page toward the clerk. Put it on the screen, he ordered. The clerk connected it to the courtroom monitor. The image appeared, grainy, zoomed in, taken from far away. A woman in a coat, walking near a grocery store parking lot. Under it, a typed caption, Defendant observed watching plaintiffs, 9:40 p.m. My father exhaled like he'd been waiting for this moment, like the pictures were his mic drop. There, he said, loud enough for the whole room. That's her. I stared at the screen and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not panic. Recognition. Because the woman in the photo wasn't me. Same general height, yes. Similar hair color, maybe. But the posture was wrong. The way she stood was wrong. And most importantly, the coat wasn't mine. I knew what I wore because after surgery, I rotated the same 3 soft coats that didn't rub my back brace. That coat on the screen had a stiff collar and a belt. I don't own a belted coat. The judge looked at me. Is that you? No, I said, calm. That's not me. My father laughed. One sharp laugh full of contempt. Of course she'll say that, he said. She thinks she can lie her way out. The judge didn't react to his tone. He reacted to his certainty. He leaned closer to the screen and tapped the bottom corner of the photo. This photo, he said slowly, has metadata. The clerk zoomed in. Timestamp, date, device model, GPS tag. The GPS tag made my stomach drop because it wasn't vague. It listed a location, one of the cities they claimed. My father's attorney stood, trying to sound confident again. Your Honor, he said, we can provide the original files. The judge held up a hand. Before you provide anything, he said, I want to ask a simple question. He turned to me. Ma'am, he said, where was your car during this period? My pulse jumped. My car? I repeated. Yes, he said. Where was it? I blinked once. In my building garage. I wasn't driving. I wasn't allowed to. My father leaned forward, eyes sharp. And how do we know you weren't? He snapped. You could have. The judge cut him off. Because she was impatient, he said flatly, tapping my hospital papers again. But your question is useful. He turned to me. Do you have a way to prove your car remained in your garage? He asked. And for a second, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my father's obsession with control had accidentally trained me to document everything. Yes, I said. My garage uses a digital access system. I can pull entry logs from my fob and license plate scans. My father's smile faltered. The judge nodded once like he'd just found the lever that would move the whole case. Do it, he said. Now. I pulled out my phone with hands that were steadier than I expected. I opened the building portal app, security access, deliveries, garage entries. I hadn't used it in weeks. My father watched me like he wanted to will my phone to die. I entered my password. The app loaded. I pulled up the log range for the dates they claimed I was stalking them. A list appeared. Entry, exit, entry, exit. Not dozens, not daily. Barely any. Because I wasn't driving. I scrolled to the date of the 9:40 p.m. photo. The log showed no vehicle movement, not just no fob use, no plate scan, no entry, no exit. I held the phone out to the clerk. The clerk stepped down, took it carefully, and walked it to the judge. The judge studied it for a long moment. Then he looked up at my father. Your evidence claims she was present in this city, he said, tapping the screen. But her vehicle did not move. My father's mouth tightened. She could have taken another car. The judge didn't bite. What other car? He asked. My father hesitated. The judge's eyes stayed on him. Name it. My father swallowed. She could have rented one. The judge nodded once, slow and cold. So now your theory is that a woman in a back brace, while inpatient, rented cars to stalk you across the state. My father's attorney stepped in quickly, voice tight. Your Honor, the plaintiffs have been traumatized. The judge turned his head toward him with a look that shut the sentence down. This is not trauma court, he said. This is evidence court. Then he looked back at the photo. And there's another problem, he added. He tapped the device model line. This photo was taken from a phone, he said, and that phone is listed as belonging to the plaintiffs. The courtroom went very still. My mother's face went pale so fast it looked like someone wiped color off her. My father's attorney blinked, then tried to pivot. That simply means the plaintiffs documented what they saw? No, the judge said, cutting him off. It means the plaintiffs are presenting a photo of someone and labeling it as the defendant, while also submitting dates that contradict hospital records and a notarized medical release with a suspended commission. He paused. This is starting to look like a constructed narrative. My father's voice rose, angry, desperate. She's been ruining us, he shouted. She wants us to suffer. The judge leaned forward. Sir, he said quietly, you are currently making yourself suffer. Then he flipped one more page in the packet. One page I hadn't seen yet, and my stomach dropped. Because it wasn't a stalking exhibit. It was a property document. A drafted agreement, typed, clean, ready to sign. At the bottom, in bold, it referenced my penthouse unit and a transfer of interest. My father's attorney shifted again, fast. The judge held the page up. Why? He asked slowly. Is there a prepared property transfer document attached to a stalking complaint? No one answered, not even my father. Because the answer was obvious and it was ugly. The judge looked at the bailiff. I want an officer present, he said. Now. Then, right in that moment, my phone buzzed again. Not a court notification, a call. From my building's property manager. I stared at the screen, my heart turning to ice before I even answered. I picked up, put it on speaker. Hello? The manager's voice came through low and urgent. I'm sorry to call like this, and she said, but your parents are in the lobby right now with a locksmith. They're saying there's a court matter and they need access to your unit immediately. The courtroom went dead silent. The judge's eyes locked onto my father. My father didn't look shocked. He looked caught. And the manager added one more sentence that made the air in my lungs disappear. They're telling security you're unstable and that you won't be coming home today. For a moment, nobody in the courtroom moved. My building manager's voice was still coming through my phone, soft, controlled, uneasy, as if she could feel she had just stepped into something dangerous. They're telling security you're unstable, she repeated, and that you won't be coming home today. The judge's gaze stayed locked on my father. Not confusion. Confirmation. Like the final puzzle piece had clicked in without him even touching it. My father's attorney opened his mouth to speak, but the judge lifted one finger. Do not, he said quietly. Then he looked at me. Ma'am, he said, keep the call on speaker. I swallowed hard. Okay. I turned slightly so the phone sat on the table edge, microphone open to the room like a witness. The judge spoke toward the phone, voice calm and authoritative. This is the judge presiding over the matter involving Miss Diars, he said. Who am I speaking with? The manager sounded startled. I'm the property manager for her building. Are her parents physically there? The judge asked. Yes, she answered. Both of them, with a man who says he's a locksmith. The judge nodded once and looked back at my father. Sir, he said, sit very still. My father's lips parted, but no words came out. The judge returned to the phone. Has anyone shown you a court order? He asked. No, the manager said quickly. They keep saying there's a case and they have papers, but nothing official. They're pressuring my front desk. The judge's voice stayed even. Do not grant access, he said. Do not allow any lock changes. Call your security and tell them this is unauthorized. If necessary, call local police. The manager exhaled sharply. Okay, I will. Then, without me asking, she added the sentence that made my skin go cold in a different way. They also tried to give us a letter, she said. It's a medical-sounding form, like permission to release information. My throat tightened. The judge's eyes narrowed. The kind of letter that would have a notary stamp? He asked. The manager hesitated. Yes. My father's attorney shifted like he was about to stand, but the bailiff stepped forward. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Ma'am, he said to the manager, I want you to email a photo of that letter to this court's clerk immediately. The clerk will give you an address. The manager agreed quickly. Yes, Your Honor. The judge nodded to the clerk. The clerk typed the email address into a note and held it up so I could read it. I repeated it into the phone. The manager said she'd send it right away. Then the judge ended the call. Not abruptly, just cleanly. And the moment it disconnected, the courtroom atmosphere changed. Because now the stalking case wasn't just falling apart. It was actively exposing a parallel operation happening in real time. The judge turned to my father's attorney first. "Counsel," he said, "your clients are in the middle of an attempt to gain access to the defendant's residence during a hearing where they accuse her of being dangerous." The attorney tried to speak. The judge didn't let him. "And they are using alleged mental instability as leverage, quote," he continued, voice cold, while also submitting a notarized medical release with a suspended notary commission. He looked down at the filing packet, then back up. "This is not a credible petition," he said. "This is abuse of process." My father finally found his voice. "She's doing this," he shouted, pointing at me. "She's calling people. She's manipulating." The judge's eyes snapped to him. "Sir," he said, quieter than before, "you are done." My father froze. The judge nodded toward the bailiff. "Bring an officer," he said again. "Now." Within minutes, a uniformed courthouse officer entered the courtroom and stood near the bench. The judge addressed him without drama. "Officer," he said, "I need this matter referred for potential investigation of forged or improperly notarized documents, and I need the parties identified for possible criminal referral." My stomach clenched. Not because I wanted spectacle, because this was finally becoming what it always should have been, a file with consequences. The judge turned to me. "Ma'am," he asked, "do you consent to your building manager providing the court with the attempted access documents your parents presented?" "Yes," I said. "Absolutely," he nodded. Then he turned to my father's attorney again. "Counsel," he said, "your petition is denied. The temporary request is dismissed, and I am issuing a protective order prohibiting the plaintiffs from contacting the defendant or attempting access to her residence while this investigation proceeds." My mother's face shattered. Tears. Real now, but too late to turn back time. "This is unfair," she choked out. "We're the victims." The judge didn't look at her. He looked at the officer. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "if you have concerns for your safety, you file properly. You do not fabricate evidence and attempt to seize property." He paused, then added the line that changed everything. "And you do not weaponize the court to take a penthouse." My father's attorney stood, voice tight. "Your Honor, we object." The judge's gaze was steady. "Noted," he said, "and rejected." Then he looked at me again. "Ma'am," he said, "do you have transportation and support today?" I hesitated. "I can manage." The judge nodded slightly like he understood pride but didn't trust it. "I'm ordering that an officer escort you from this building and that you be given time to contact building security to ensure no locks are changed," he said. "You should also contact your bank and credit bureaus immediately." My father stared at the bench like he'd just watched the ground disappear. My mother's mouth trembled, searching for a sentence that would bring the old world back. But the old world was gone. Because their own urgency had exposed them. If they'd waited, they might have kept the lie alive longer, but they couldn't wait. They needed the penthouse, they needed control, and they tried to take it while I was in court proving I couldn't even stand without a brace. As we left, the courthouse officer walked beside me, calm and professional. In the hallway, I heard my father's voice behind us, low, furious, trying to keep some control. "This isn't over," he hissed. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. Because the truth wasn't something I had to argue anymore. It was something the system had printed. And for the first time in a long time, the paper was on my side.